Well, hi, everybody. I'm Bill Bateman, part of the team here at OSTA, the Oregon State Tenants Association, and this is part two of my Inside OSTA series, where we have an opportunity to meet the members of the board and find out a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This is part two of my interview with board member Matthew Johnson. When we last left, we were discussing the growing concerns in the community. In this session, we're going to look a little more deeply into the problems and the solutions. Let's join the interview already in progress.
Yeah, no, I dealt with a few years back this it was a couple. It was a white woman, a Hispanic man. The white woman went to the park, buying a home, went through the whole thing. The park manager said, "Okay, well, come back tomorrow with your husband. We'll sign all the paperwork." And she showed up with her husband, who was Hispanic, who was a American citizen, had a job, and I mean, and the manager threw the papers in the garbage can and said, "I'll burn that trailer down before I'll let that,"
Oh
use a
my.
particular epithet, move into this park. And, I think that there was some kind of settlement, sent them immediately to Boley, which is the state representative for the the National Federal EEOC, Equal Opportunity Office. And Boley investigates housing discrimination.
Right.
And so I believe that there was an investigation, and I believe they found reasonable cause to believe that there had been housing discrimination. I don't know.
Well, now I know that one of the things OSTA does is help people through forming different types of associations.
Yes.
And I just worked on an article a little bit ago last week, in fact, about some changes. Used to be the Committee of Seven was the end all be all for folks to deal with associations. And it seems that is not the case anymore. The law has changed. There's other alternatives. Can you help us out with that?
Well, I need to correct your statement. The Committee of Seven has been around forever.
Right.
It has never been the end all be all. And in
Okay.
fact, it's never been much of anything. They've never been very effective in my experience. And, like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've helped many a tenant committee, tenant association form around the state. And in fact, back in the late 90s, I used to offer a service. I would travel anywhere in the state, do a 2 hour presentation to any group or tenant association. I used to charge $75 for that.
Oh, wow.
I know. And I don't even think I charged for gas or anything. And so I did that. I did that around the state. I did that over. I remember going to Redmond. I remember going to Roseburg, the Ashland area a couple times down there, Washington County. Anyway, so the Committee of Seven was a rare thing, and very seldomly done. What I saw, so there's OSTA. We used to have a lot of chapters around the state. There would be we'd get a certain amount of members in a park, and I think it was 10%, and then they could form a chapter and have officers. And so that was one type of tenant association. And probably at one time that was the most common tenant association around the state. But a lot of parks just formed their own associations, just
Hmm.
on their own. They just got together. They are recognized in the statute, required to, if you have a form a tenant association in your park, you can give a one-page description to the management, and they have to give that copy of that to every new potential tenant in the park. So the statute has always recognized tenant associations, whether or not they were committees of seven. The committees of seven have one thing that just a regular independent tenant committee doesn't have, and that is the right to request that the landlord meet with them once a year, listen to their concerns, and then after that meeting, committee of seven can send a list of those concerns to the landlord, and the landlord is supposed to reply. Now, if the landlord refuses to meet with the committee of seven, again, we're back to hiring an attorney, filing a lawsuit. If the landlord fails to bond to the written list of concerns, again, there's really not much recourse for the tenants. And, also, what does it mean to respond to your concerns? And a landlord can write back a letter and say, I don't give a crap about your concerns. That's a
And they
response.
technically responded, right?
That's landlord has complied with the statute. So that having that so-called advantage to force a landlord to meet with you is really not is really meaningless. And what has been the tendency that I've seen over and over again is that when a group of tenants form a committee of seven and they sort of go through these motions of demanding the meeting, and maybe the landlord meets with them and they send the letter and maybe the landlord responds, their feeling is that's it. That's all we can do. That's all the statute requires us to do. And so that's the end.
Comes
And
apart and kind of fails.
right, and they feel like, well, that was a waste of time. And so, my experience is that it's just not a way to go, not something worthy of spending time on, unless. So again, there are several different kinds of tenant associations you can have in the park. And as I mentioned, you can have a OSTA chapter, but the officers, the voting people in that are only the OSTA members, and the rest of the park is not included in that. I mean, they can certainly come to the meetings, they can listen, they can offer their input, but as far as voting on anything or being president, you have to be an OSTA member. So that's one type. And then there's what I would refer to as an independent, which is just one formed in a park by the people there. These have been, in my experience, again, the most effective out there because they don't feel like they're relying on OSTA or someone else to do their bidding. And usually these stronger ones are in bigger parks. They tend to be maybe a little more affluent parks where people have more time. Maybe they're higher percentage of people with higher educations, but these independent committees have been effective many times around the state, bringing lawsuits or just bringing pressure on landlords, organizing an entire park. Again, whereas an OSTA chapter tends to be mostly just the OSTA members, and the other people in the park may not feel they have quite stick in the fire or whatever.
They
Whereas
don't feel
these,
represented, I think. We just formed I guess we're talking about the unaffiliated tenant committee.
yeah,
We just did that here in the park. And there had been previous chapters that had experienced exactly what you're talking about. They met, they got 5 or 7 people together, and one guy and one gal did all the work, and then it all fell apart. And they said, why am I paying this money to this organization? And A, B, C, D, E, F. We invited everybody. We got 50% of the people to sign into the association. And we dropped off the things for the new tenants and the stuff like that. The new managers are kind of like, oh, we're from Washington. Is this the law? I said, yeah, we'll sign you up for some courses, which is another thing I guess we can do, help them with. So I really like this as an approach. Everybody feels more included. They feel heard. And we're already seeing some changes in the existing list of problems.
well, and so here's what I've seen is that then having this structure and this organization already there, tenant association, you can also then form as maybe a subgroup or just another group, a committee of seven,
Exactly.
so that then you could demand this meeting with the landlord and go in and have this whole other organization behind you, and realize that when you get nothing, I mean, I'm not going to say all landlords treat that meeting as just a waste of their time, but a lot of them do.
Hmm.
And again, if you if you get that from your landlord, it doesn't mean that your organization falls apart, because that's not the end all be all of your organization. You still have your tenant association.
Exactly.
And so, that's the way I encourage parks to organize their tenant associations. And I think that OSTA needs to rethink the chapter kind of format. In the past, again, Pat and Fred would go to a park, and they'd spend a week there, and they would get half the people in the park to join OSTA.
Sure.
And that was different, but we just don't have we don't have a retired couple who has nothing, well, I don't want to say nothing better to do, because clearly that was a really good thing that Pat and
Very
Fred did,
valuable. Yeah.
and it was awesome, but it required a full-time dedication on their part. And like I said,
Exactly.
when the legislature was in session, their park was in the Salem area, and so they were in Salem, and they were down in the halls of power there, and they were making a difference. So I think OSTA maybe needs to rethink the chapter idea, unless and until we can get another Fred and Pat who was willing to travel around the state year round and recruit members. And I tell you another thing, there's also the kinds of tenant associations that tend to revolve around social stuff,
Exactly.
potlucks, garage sales, whatever. And again, those that were organized around those sorts of issues tend not to last either,
Right.
because you end up with the same sort of, the two people doing all the organizing and setting up and doing all that. But where I've seen the sort of social groups last is, again, where they're sort of a subcommittee of a larger group like the one you formed.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's more people, and you can rotate people in and out of that and make that work a lot better.
People can get sick. People can go on vacation and visit their grandchildren, that type of thing. Because that's a real life thing.
Well, and there's burnout. I mean, if it's just one or two people doing it all, they get burned out,
Oh, yeah.
and they get tired of doing it. And to Fred and Pat's credit, I think they both kept doing it until they died.
Oh, my.
And I'm not sure I would suggest anybody do that. It's just hard to find anybody with that kind of dedication and willing to, go to those extremes. And so people get burned out. And so the bigger, more inclusive your organization is, the better. The more diverse sort of
Hmm.
activities you have
Right.
going on, the better. So someone, someone wants to support your committee, wants to be part of it. It really just wants to, help with garage sales.
And okay.
And that's fine. They can be part of your group that does, the bigger stuff, the lobbying work, and that work, and they can support that by maybe doing something different, not necessarily that. And so I just, that can be a problem with a committee of seven, because again, that's like at the most seven people.
That's it.
Your organization, you can have a board of directors, you can have 25 people if you want.
Exactly.
You can have 10 officers and whatever. And I just see that that's a much better way to sustain your organizing and your work and your advocacy. More people that have a stake, more you can get done. And again, the less burnout
Okay.
happens.
Well, I know you are a busy person. Do you have any final thoughts for today? Well, maybe we can get you back in a couple months and talk about some of the more advanced issues in a little more detail. But anything you want to wrap up today? Anything that you feel needs a second pass?
Well, I would encourage your listeners to, be informed, know what's going on. Stuff is happening out there that you may or may not know of, that can have a real impact on your lives. And I know a lot of people are in parks, that live in parks, are retired. I don't want to say older, because by the way, Bill, today is my 70th birthday.
Well, happy birthday, sir.
Thank you. But I know a lot of people are retired, and they're tired, They worked all their lives and, they want to have this time where they can just relax and, go visit the grandchildren and not have to think too hard and not have to work too hard. But advice that doctors always give when you're retired is don't just sit around and do nothing. Get involved, get out there, do something, because if you sit there and don't do anything, don't get involved, don't learn new stuff, don't care, you're not going to live very long.
You're going to fall behind.
So
Absolutely.
So I would encourage everybody to get out there and get informed, get involved, care about your neighbors in some way or another, help your neighbors, and live longer.
Outstanding. Matthew, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. We appreciate you in the OSTA boardroom. We appreciate you taking time out today and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to help people all over the state. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
And once again, I want to thank board member Matthew Johnson. And in case you didn't hear my disclaimer the first time, Matthew is a board member and an attorney, but not an attorney for OSTA. All board members, including myself, share our ideas, expertise, experience, and information, but we do not provide legal advice. I want to keep that really clear and not give any misconceptions. Okay, there are links in the startup page for getting the newsletter, for subscribing to the podcast. There's a lot of good information. We hope you'll research the website. We hope you come by, and we do hope you'll become a member. So click that membership link. Also, please share this with anyone who wishes to use it. Thanks for coming by. We'll have more very soon. Be safe and take care.